Going to learn a Maamar of the Alter Rebbe from this week's parsha, which is from Shlach, which is what the parsha is in Chutz La'aretz, on the Haftorah of this week. Let's bring up the text. So Haftorah, for those in Eretz Yisrael, we read it on Shabbos, is the Haftorah of, like this week's parsha, is Yehoshua sending spies before the Jewish people actually entered the land to Jericho, to Yericho. So it says, Vayishlach Yehoshua min Shittim shnayim anashim meraglim cheresh. He sent him to send two spies. Leimer lechuru es haaretz ves Yericho. Check out the land, specifically Jericho, Yericho, in a hidden way. V'hinei bevadei lo asi Yeshua midaitei. We have to know for sure and be certain that Yehoshua didn't on his own send the spies. He was obviously commanded by Hashem. He wouldn't do it on his own, especially after the story of Moshe. But when it comes to Moshe's spies, it says shlach lecha. What do it mean? Send to yourself. Send for yourself. The rabbis have taught us the daitcha. You decide the daitcha according to your own understanding. I'm not going to command you to send spies. And of course, there's many drushes and ideas and mefarshim to explain this idea of shlach lecha the daitcha, that Moshe has to decide. It's up to him to decide if he wants spies. But if Yeshua sends spies, it says clearly and doesn't mention shlach lecha the daitcha, that if he just says it matter-of-factly, that means Hashem told him to send spies. So what's this mean? When it comes to checking out the entirety of the land, God doesn't command to send spies. He leaves it up to Moshe's discretion. Jericho, which was considered the lock, the entry point of Eretz Yisrael, Yericho was sealed up. It was a very fortified a city right on the west side of the Jordan River, as we all know what Jericho is, of Eretz Yisrael. All the nations had representation in Jericho. Doesn't say if all the nations means all the nations of Eretz Yisrael, all the nations in general. Okay, so it does. The nations, the locals over there, all had embassies and representations in Jericho, because that was the entry point. Kol bale Yericho, all those who, so to say, have the scent, that they were all included in the city. Shahaisa klolus Eretz Yisrael. It was like a mini Israel, mini Eretz Yisrael. Mini Eretz Yisrael was Jericho. That although the nations were obviously spread out, the seven nations were spread out in and around Eretz Yisrael, they all had representations and peoples in the city of Yericho. To understand all this, why? First of all, what's the idea of Yericho having a little bit of everyone? At the same time, Moshe says to spy out the entirety of the land, and it's left to Moshe's discretion. Yeshua says to check out Jericho, and seemingly it's obviously a command from Hashem. So why would Hashem command to check out Yericho and not to check out Eretz Yisrael? Leave it to Moshe's discretion. To understand all this, and mainly to understand what this means within our own avodah, the idea of spying out Eretz Yisrael in its entirety, and the idea of spying out Eretz Yisrael in the concept of Yericho. The level of Yericho within a person. That's definitely a person needs spies. You have to know what Yericho means within a person. But when it comes to the rest of Eretz Yisrael, we're not certain if a person needs to send. Possibly the person is not able to spot the entirety of Eretz Yisrael. Hello, Reb Shimon. But when it comes to Yericho, that's something that's a definite. So he says like this. The pasuk says like this. Avram Zakin Baba Yam. Avram became elderly in his days. The Pirish Bazar, what does it mean, Baba, in his days? So it says, Pirish Bazar, Shinislavish B'yamim, he enclothed himself in his days. What's that mean? What does it mean to enclothe yourself in the days? It is the garments. Hanitin l'neshama, that's been given to the soul of each person, is that you have a certain amount of time that you live in this world, and and the garments that you have to acquire in these days. Everyone's given the appropriate amount of time. The amount of garments you have to acquire and gather throughout your days. That God formed for each person their amount of days. And how do you acquire garments in the allocated amount of time that you need? Is through Torah mitzvahs, Adam Isaac B'yamav, that a person preoccupies themselves throughout their days in Torah mitzvahs. That's how you acquire garments. V'chol yom shebitul Torah u'mitzvahs chaser me'aneshama halavushin k'viyarch bitulai. And every day that a person doesn't perform Torah mitzvahs, then the soul is lacking the garments, each person according to what you've not done. If you were able to do something and you didn't do it, you're lacking the garments. If you're able to, if you've done it, then you have the garments. It's very simple. It's like anything. If you do something, you have it. If you don't do something, you don't have it. So now we have to understand, what does it mean? So we're trying to understand, first of all, back to the original question. Why for Yehoshua to go to Yericho, it's required, it's mandatory. And why for the spies, for Moshe, it's according to Moshe's discretion. And what does this mean in Avodas Adam? There's certain things that we have to spy out within ourselves, which is represented by the concept of Yericho, that's mandatory. We have to be on top, have a clarity of what's going on in the Jericho, in the Yericho of our lives. And then the entirety of Eretz Yisrael, it's something that according to each person, depending on the level that they're holding. So understand that we started to say that a person what's the purpose of this world? Is to acquire garments. A person's allocated X amount of time in their life to acquire the garments they need. How do you acquire garments? Through doing the Torah mitzvahs. If you have an opportunity to do Torah mitzvahs, or you're expected to do Torah mitzvahs on certain days or every day, depending on what the mitzvah is, and you don't do it, so you're lacking the garment that you could have acquired that mitzvah. So what are these garments? Right? What is the idea of garments? So you won't be naked. What does the soul need these garments that you acquire via Torah mitzvahs? And on a daily basis, some mitzvahs you have to do over and over again, like davening. Certain mitzvahs you have to do over and over again, like tzedakah, Talmud Torah. So what is this idea of the garments that we need so we shouldn't be naked? What is the Torah telling us about this? Why do we have to know this? Okay. So the idea is like this. When we say that God, that we've sanctified you. What does it mean to sanctify Hashem? God doesn't need us to sanctify him. He's sanctified on his own. By definition, God is sanctified. What does it mean that we make God holy, we make God separate? What's the 3 times we say Kaddish? Kaddish, Kaddish, Kaddish. We've learned in our Kitzur class, in Hilchas Tefillah, that we say Kaddish, Kaddish 3 times, right? We have the Kaddish, Kaddish we say in Hashem, before Kriya Shema. We have the Kaddish, Kaddish we say in Uvalat Zion. And of course, we have the Kaddish, Kaddish we say in the Kedusha and Chazar Sashatz, in the repetition of the Shemona Esrei. And as we learned in our Kitzur Shulchan Aruch class, that they're not the same. And therefore, if you're holding where you would say Kaddish in one, you don't necessarily answer in the other one if it's a time that you can't answer. For instance, if you're in the silent Shemona Esrei. Because the Kaddish in the silent Shemona Esrei is much higher than the Kaddish, let's say, in Eshem or in Avodat Zion. So what is this idea of saying Kaddish 3 times? And why 3? The Torah is given to us in 3 general methods of serving Hashem, which we call the garments, or the tikkunim, the tools, which are thought, speech, and action. Shekama mitzvahs tluim b'dibra levad. Certain mitzvahs that the main way to perform them is via speech. There's certain mitzvahs that are mainly done through thought. And many mitzvahs are dependent on our actions. A person may make the mistake to say, that maybe that how God reveals himself, how there's a revelation of godliness in action is not equal to how God reveals himself in speech and thought. That they think, possibly a person may think, how could you compare the refinedness of my thought and surely my thought and even my speech, to compare it to the action, which action is materialistic. Misava means like it's grub, it's coarse in a sense, very physical. Almost lifeless compared to the refinedness and spirituality of speech and even more so thought. How can you compare when a person gives silver or copper, money, in tzedakah, which is action, to something a person has of emotional and thought and speech towards Hashem? It's not true to separate, to say that there's a difference between the action and the thought and speech. As far as God's concerned, your speech or your thought is not more refined than your action. It's all equal to Hashem. Because on the level of God's godliness and holiness, our thoughts, as refined as they may be, and as spiritual as they may be, and as dak, so they are not different to God than our actions. Everything doesn't matter equally. He chose, because he chose so, to get affected by what we do equally in our action, speech, and thought. God doesn't feel closer to what we understand as heavens or elevated as what we understand as low. We're not talking about low as in doing something wrong, but something more coarse, like the physical world. A person may think that God could only be found in the spiritual spaces, but in the physical spaces, he can't be found. To God, they're all equally nothing, and they're all equally everything. Essentially, it doesn't matter to God. They're all nothing to God, like they're like nothingness. But he chose to be affected. And if he chooses, he could choose equally to be affected by our actions as by our thoughts and speech. God is infinite. And nothing, not even our spirituality, or not even the spiritual spaces of creation, could measure up, you could say, is closer to God than a physical space. That God is separate. Kaddish from the word separate, equally in heaven and earth. He's not separate more from this world, from what we called Aretz, than he is from heaven. A person will think, well, God feels more comfortable in heaven. It's more of a spiritual space. It's not true. Because even the angels in the highest worlds of revelation, if it's a creation, is equally distant from God or separate from the essence of God. To God, as far as God's concerned, from his perspective, heaven and earth are equal. He who Kaddish removed them, he's equally separate from all of them. That's notwithstanding the fact that they exist from God's creation and continuance to give vitality and life. If God is constantly giving the yearning towards, going back towards its source, and then the shuv to give the power of existence and creation, but equally. So how do we bring down godliness into this space? It's through the Jewish people. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, as it says, Yisrael, who's like the Jewish people, God's people, the Jewish people, Yisrael. Goy Echad Baretz, a single nation in the world. Pirush, what does that mean, Goy Echad Baretz? Sha'afilu Baretz mitachas, even from our perspective, a place that's considered earthly. We bring God's oneness. So the idea is, this is a famous, so you could learn the translation of the verse, Mika Amcha Yisrael Goy Echad Baretz, who's like the Jewish people, unique people in the earth. Or you learn it like the Alter Rebbe says, Mika Amcha Yisrael, who's like the Jewish people, Goy, a nation that bring Echad into Aretz. They bring oneness into the world. But, and the difference is huge. If you learn it, who's like the Jewish people, so to say, a single people, elevated or separate people in the earth, is his way of Jewish people being separate from the world. Everyone else is in one camp, and the Jewish people are different. But you translate the way the Alter Rebbe says, it's the contrary. That the Jewish people are the ones who bring the oneness of God into the whole world, for the whole world's benefit. So when you talk about the Vana B'charta, the chosen people, it's not chosen to distance the Jewish people from the rest of the world. On the contrary, it's the chosen people to bring godliness via the Jewish people. There's oneness in the whole world. The idea is to bring oneness of God into the world. The famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe said, the Rebbe Baruch Mazebush, that the Rebbe Baruch, the grandson of the Alter Baal Shem Tov, that the Baal Shem Tov, when the land Poland that has its Tsar, its angel, so to say, that its interest is that there shouldn't be godliness in the world. Welcome the Jewish people, Polin, here will rest, where the Jewish people found many years till the Holocaust, a home in Poland, was because he said the Jewish people don't know how to say Shema Yisrael. They don't know how to say Echad. He wasn't threatened by the Echad. Comes the Baal Shem Tov, and now the Echad was revealed in Poland. He said, oh, 1 second, this is not what I agreed to. Because the Jewish people, through the Chassidus and the Baal Shem Tov, taught, what does it mean to reveal the Echad in the world? And that the Tsar of Poland said, I didn't agree to that. That's why we say 3 times Kaddish. Why? The idea is to bring God's oneness. In our own space, that the oneness is that God is one within our thoughts, within our speech, and within our actions. This corresponds to 3 levels of the soul, of the functioning conscious part of the soul, nefesh, ruach, neshama. Is to bring God's sanctity in all our thoughts, speech, and actions, and via that it spills over into our place of influence in the entire world. And what does it mean to bring Kedusha into Machshav V'Dibur Maisa is actually by the performance of Torah mitzvahs through our Machshav V'Dibur Maisa. When we preoccupy our thought, speech, and action with Torah, that's bringing Kedusha into Torah, through our thought, speech, and actions via Torah mitzvahs. That's why they're called the Levushin, the garments. These are the garments of the soul. The garments of the soul is the Machshav V'Dibur Maisa. Now the Machshav V'Dibur Maisa, thought, speech, and action of a person is holy, because it's about mitzvahs and Torah. And now that the soul has these garments that it acquired through using our thought, speech, and action for holiness, now we're able to be there's like we've learned many times, there's garments that protect you from an environment, then there's garments that allow you to be in an environment. The garments of Torah mitzvahs allow for a person. It's the middle that because there's God's Ein Sof, infinite, in the Torah mitzvahs when we enclothe ourselves. So to say, with the mitzvahs, which is connected to the Ein Sof, we're able to take in a greater light than our souls were able to take in had we not have the garments. And therefore, if you don't perform mitzvahs, you're missing a garment. Because every mitzvah, even if a person thinks, okay, whatever, I davened yesterday, I have the garment from yesterday, that's yesterday's garment. It's not like we totally physically, that how many sweaters could I wear, how many pairs of underwear could I wear, how many coats can I wear. There's no limit to how many garments, and not only that, or if there is no limit, God decided how many days you should live to acquire how many garments. And if you lived so many days, but you didn't acquire all the garments, so then you're lacking garments. What's tshuva? Maybe tshuva is that a person's able to rectify that, to acquire the garments that you haven't acquired because of lack of performance. When a person's naked without the garments, how could you come one with God's oneness, which is beyond the world? Your creation. And you need the garments to create, like I said, to the infinite. And in God's Torah, and God can clothe himself. What does it mean he clothed himself? He clothed his Ein Sof in Torah mitzvahs. Because a creation on its own is something that is here and then will cease to be here. It's it's present, and then it's nifsed, it's going to be gone. You can't just connect to God's oneness just like that. You need the garments to connect to God's oneness. Your thoughts of Torah mitzvahs. And that covers a person in their whole body through thought, speech, and action of Torah mitzvahs. Because the Torah mitzvahs comes from God's oneness. Therefore, when you enclose yourself in God's oneness, you're able to connect the Torah mitzvahs. And this is what Abigail told King David HaMelech. That the soul, so to say, of our master David HaMelech, is bound with the bound of life because of the avodah of David HaMelech. The Kemoisha Adam Tzorah Kasbi Becheret. The person bounds one's money. Kachti Nafshi Tzur B'Tzorah Chaim, you're bound with life. The Hanush Yakifenu V'Albeshenu Levush Tzorah Chaim Nikol Bechad Es Hashem. You're totally encompassed, like the money is totally like in a bag of money. It's totally enclosed in the garments of life, and therefore the life allows for the person to connect to the oneness of Hashem. And he says like this: this garment, the ray of the God's infinite that's in the Torah mitzvahs, is like a reach, it's like a smell. The person has the smell of the fear of God. Just like a smell is not the thing itself, right? When you smell something, you don't have the actual thing itself. You just have the smell of the thing. It's sort of say a smell that comes like an aura that comes from something. So too the mitzvahs is an aura that comes from the infinite. It's like a smell. You know everything. The smell allows you to connect to what it's an aura from. And this is called the long complexion. Now he quotes a verse from Yeshaya that says about in Hashem's avoda, that a person in Hashem's response to the Jewish people, I'm going to lengthen. Say arach ampim is the long complexion. I'm going to lengthen my anger. Utihilasi, my praise, echtamlach, is my, so to say, holding back that the raft from my nose. Echtam is the nostrils. So kamoisha kasavidur nasa, like it says like this. So what do we see? That where does the smell go? Where does it connect? Where's the entry point of a reach to the person that's smelling something? Is through the nostrils. So we say, it says brought down in the Medrash on the pasuk, which is really talking about God's compassion. It means literally the pasuk is talking about God's patience with the Jewish people. Hilasi, my praise is echtamlach, that I the raft that would come out of my nose, I extended to you. But we say, what does it mean? That the connection comes through the nostrils. So we say, levala choyta meni mispal, to the one of the nostrils, the one of the smell, I pray. Levala choyta meni mischanen, and the one with the nostrils and the smell, I plead. This, so to say, connection of the infinite, the royach, is something that connects through the smell, through the nostrils. Which is the smell. God is called the one of the nostrils. Because he's the source, and just like the nostrils is, so to say, where the anger goes out, where the smell goes in, that's one of the channels of connection. So the balachai, and it's a deep connection. That's what we say, that the mitzvah, that when a person makes a bracha on besamim, it affects the soul because it goes deep. Smells goes much deeper than taste, than eating. So the balachaitim he reaches much more to the essence. So when we talk to God as balachaitim, it's an essential connection, and therefore there's more of essence there, so to say. That through the nostrils is where the essence could expand. And that's what it means. Arich Ampim means the long complexion. There's a long, like the mitzvah says about Torah mitzvahs, it's Aruchim Eretz Midah. It's longer than measurement. It comes from a very high place, like the smell reaches deep. The Hainu Ein Seif Baruch Hu, the infinite. Which has no limits, and can reach really low into any place. So that's what it means that through Torah mitzvahs, which is al balachaitam and yimischanan, balachaitam and yimispala, you're connecting to the essence. It means when we talk about the balachaitam, it's not a way God manifests in a way of distance or disconnect. It's reaching the essence, the core, right? A person, a good smell could trigger a deep reaction all the way to the core of the person, and vice versa, a bad smell. So through the balachaitim, we connect with the infinite of Hashem. It's an extension it's a length of the form, so to say, of the complexion. It extends itself through the smell to get to the essence. And these are through the so to say, the reach means to say when a person, the garments are not just garments that are like you have a person that has something that has nothing. It's your clothing is sometimes very disconnected. A nice, pleasant smell from a person could get a very deep reaction from the person who's smelling it. That's why people use perfume or different things. So the effect of a powerful fragrance on a person grabs the attention of the person you're trying to get an attraction from. And so too with Hashem, when the levush is not something that's disconnected from us or disconnected from the person that you're trying to get attraction or connection to, but it's through a fragrance, through a smell, it reaches deep within the relationship. And that relationship in this case is Torah mitzvahs through Hashem and the Jewish people. The fragrance that we give off that reaches to the core, so to say, of Hashem is the fragrance, the reach of Torah mitzvahs. And the reach of Torah mitzvahs that is including in our machshava dibur ma'isa. It's a fragrance that represents a completeness of our dominance of our levushim, so to say, of thought, speech, and actions, that they're all dedicated and focused on Hashem and Torah mitzvahs. And how do you? What is it? It's not a one-time thing. You can't just give a spritz. It's consistency. It's in every day. How do you really acquire a proper fragrance of holiness to connect to God's essence? Is consistency. Yomim, every day, it's a day in and day out, you're doing what you should do, filling your days with Torah mitzvahs. It says about Avram Avinu, Avram Zakin Baba Yomim, he had full days of performance. Sheyesh Shasa Yomim, like throughout the year, there's 365 days. Shem Shasa Mashach is 365, various different flows that one brings down. Kamay Lamashal Shasa Gidim, like the 365 arteries, which the Shadam Vachais Hayoitzim Min Alev Lechalevarim Mishachim Derech Hagidim, like the arteries are the flow of the blood throughout the body, so too these days, each day is a flow to bring this connection. Shehem bechinas gvuras, like blood is severity, but also it's this with a rush, with power. Shishtarach adam he's gabras, and what does this mean? To use strength, li'isgar b'lechfaya, li'sitrachra, to fight and dominate your other side, to condense it to kafia, to subdue it. And begin in your thoughts, speech, and actions. Every day, in every situation, you dominate how you think about a situation, how you speak about a situation, how you act on a situation, specifically in infusing it. When you have the Yetzer Hara saying, don't do this mitzvah, or do this avera, don't wake up for davening, don't put on tefillin, don't light Shabbos candles, don't keep Shabbos. So your actions, speech, and thoughts are being totally controlled, that you're dominating the machshavah within you, the thought, speech, and action. That you should only serve God with your thought, speech, and action, even if it's not willingly, even if you have to use kafiyah, even if you have to use force on yourself, because you're gravitating towards easy or towards not doing Torah mitzvahs. The Rebbe says this is the rule. And a person has to realize and to contemplate. When a person thinks holy thoughts, you're bringing in a holy garment. And that your intentions is not because this is the way I'm going to smell nice, right? Because we said that the levushim are like a fragrance. Not because there's something in it for you. The pras means what's God going to give me if I do a mitzvah. But just the whole point is just to be connected to God, to be connected to His oneness. This should be your motivation. This should be what you want. You never want to be separate from God's oneness. But on the other flip side, you also have to realize, on the contrary, what is the effect of bad thoughts? It doesn't work one way. If a holy thought brings you to God's oneness, is a good fragrance, what is a bad thought? These are impure garments for the soul. Don't be like the fools who make the mistake. A pesi is a fool. It's no big deal. It's kal. It's easy to have thoughts that are inappropriate. Inappropriate could be anything. Jealousy, anger, kavod, inappropriate in relationships. It's whatever it is in it, whatever the thought is, that's not holy. I'm not doing anything. I'm just thinking about it. The person may say, well, it says in the Chazal teach us that God doesn't count the bad as an action, so I didn't do anything. If it's a non-holy thought, or especially if it's a bad thought, then person may think if it says machshava ra, a bad thought, God doesn't count as an action. So what about something that's not so bad? It's just not holy. What's so bad with it? What's so wrong with it? The Rebbe says the fact is, when you have a thing that's a machshava ra or machshava tmeya, impure, it's a garment on you. We're not talking about punishment, schar v'onish, just like the focus of doing a mitzvah, of having a good thought, is not for its reward. It's just because you want to be connected. It's not about the punishment, so you won't get punished. But you're not connected. These are garments that disconnect you. Just like a good thought encompasses a person from head to toe, so to a bad thought. And the outcome is with these bad garments, it's like a person who has a bad fragrance. The next person you're trying to build an attraction to doesn't want to be near you. You don't smell. You don't have a good body odor. So we don't have a good spiritual body odor. Tashem. Person therefore shouldn't be light on a bad thought, an inappropriate thought, or a forbidden thought. But that should be on the level of serving idols. Why? What's serving idols? Someone who disconnects from Hashem. Which is the most severe of all violations, transgressions. Because it doesn't really make a difference if technically you did something wrong or if you get punished. It's all about, are you connected or not? So you're not connected if you're enclothing yourself in wrong garments, in garments that are giving off a bad fragrance. So you're not going to be connected to that person. And therefore a person has to be from, so to say, a bitterness of calculation. What does that mean? To really analyze daily. How many thoughts have I gone throughout the day, and what kind of thoughts have I thought? Because my thoughts are my garments. This is what first man said, that he said, Yomim Yitzhar, God gave us a certain amount of days, V'loi, with an vav, for it, Echad Behem, is to be connected to God's oneness. So V'loi, also negative, that I shouldn't have any negative thoughts that disconnect from God's oneness. And he realized that when he ate from the tree of knowledge. Gol mi roi necha, Pirshur Isis Atzmi Orim, what's Gol mi roi necha? I see myself naked. B'li levush, I don't have garments. Like a person who's a golem, who's just created from clay. Like they said, like Adam and Eve said, that after they ate from the Eitz Hadas, they saw themselves as naked. They didn't have garments to connect Hashem. What does it mean God formed days? He gave me days, which are the garments, to enclothe my soul. To bring down the oneness. Aval v'lo yechad b'hem pirush shani hu shelo yimshach b'hem b'chinas echad. V'lo yechad means I didn't do the oneness. I didn't bring down the oneness. Every moment I have an opportunity to bring God's oneness down to the world, I didn't do it now. When I have a wrong thought and especially a wrong action. Zehu, and this is, he says, this is b'chinas meraglim sheshach yishur raglis richa. This is what it means, yiricha. Yiricha is the fragrance. The fragrance is the garments. The garments is your machshavdi meiser. The bottom line of your days have you spent in your action, speech, and thought. Yiricha, what's going on with your fragrance? You have to spy that out. That's something you must be in control of. That's what the Alter Rebbe calls in the Beinani. The Beinani, we can't all be tzaddikim. The Rebbe is going to go in to explain that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted a deeper dominance, the dominance of the character, not just the performance. The difference between a person who dominates their speech, thought, and action, or thought, speech, and action, is a person who's, like he says, it's kfiyah, it's a skafia. You haven't changed your character. You're not. It's not that you don't want to think these things, or you don't want to do things you shouldn't be doing, or it's not a struggle to do what you should be doing. But you overcome. Skafia is you overcome your struggle. You overcome your struggle of your character, even. You overcome your struggle of your laziness. But that you have to dominate. There's no answer to not having control over your thoughts, speech, and action. That's the garments. That's the avod of the Beinani. Moshe Rabbeinu Lasser Sa'aris, he wanted to check what's going on with me. Who am I? How is my character? How am I going to be able to fix that everything about me, not just in my performance of thought, speech, and action, but about me as my character? How's that doing? That's not so simple. That's what Moshe said. God says to Moshe, L'daitcha. That's for your discretion. Are you such a person? Are you holding on the level that you could master that? And sometimes it's actually dangerous to go to a space like that. When a person is going to, could fall, have a yerida, have an afila, have a descent or a fall from sometimes evaluating your character versus evaluating your performance. When you look at yourself and say, my character is a bad person. I have a tendency to be jealous or angry or other things that I have a tendency towards. And that gets you down. That's not for everyone to examine. The bottom line is, how are you acting on it? How are you acting in your thoughts, speech, and action? That's where everyone can have control. Sometimes the character is something that we work on in pace, slowly. We have the 49 days of the Omer. But that's l'daitcha, that's to your discretion. You have to be careful. The spies that Moshe said didn't come back with a good conclusion. This is why Yeshua sent spies, and it was a commandment. It wasn't l'daitcha. It wasn't at Joshua's discretion, because your reach, your fragrance, which is created by your levushim, your garments, that you have to dominate. How are you doing in your thoughts, speech, and action? That you have to have a clear understanding. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you want to think something wrong. What you do have to work on is if you do think something wrong, especially speak or especially act, whether it's in the transgressions or the lack of the positive commandments. And therefore, it's nothing. Therefore, you have to have a clarity. You have to be spying that out in yourself constantly. But what about the spies that Moshe sent? Loser said Canaan to check the entirety of their Canaan. The Hainu, what does it mean? That through checking the land of the 7 nations is you're getting deeper than just your fragrance, but the character, the essence of your love and fear for Hashem. That's not for everyone to do. That's only Moshe, who's the son, a much greater power. Which means God's wisdom. Maamar that Moshe was like the sun. Not everyone's equal on that level. To be able to dominate the muhus, the character of their love and fear, which is a dominance of the character in general of their 7 middos. Therefore, that's not a commandment for every person. I'm not commanding you to go so far. That's not as important about who you are, but how you are. How you are, you have to dominate. How you are, you have to spy out. Who you are, you could work it in paces. There's times for that. Of course, we have to be Mashana Teva Midaisav. A person has to work to change their character. We don't ignore our character, but it's not at the same level of being an obligatory commandment constantly. To know what you're doing, that has to be done in a long. That's a long journey in life to work on yourself. But the ones that Joshua said, a person constantly has to spy out, constantly has to evaluate. Don't be a soul that's naked without garments. Which are the Torah, the fragrance of the Torah mitzvahs. That's why the parentheses now to the end. We have a few minutes. We'll kind of touch on a few points here. He brings down Vayishlach Yehoshua Reish Pashlach Berus Reish Parshas Beis Hema Yotzrim. It talks about in Divrei Yomim when it goes through the different people. It says these are the formers. Ela Meraglim Hadov Dechsiv Vayishlach Yehoshua. Yotzrim is the ones who form. So he says, what does it mean? Hema Yotzrim. These are the former, the ones who form. These are the person who form, who dominate the days that have been formed for you. God created the man. Vayitzer b'shnei yudin. It says Vayitzer with two yuds. Shapirish Barabbas, the Medrash says, what's the two yuds? In a person was formed with two yuds. The person has within them the Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. These are the Yotzrim of Yehoshua, that the idea is the bottom line in performance. The Yetzer Hara has to be subdued to the Yetzer Tov. Therefore, in Vayitzer, if you look over here in the word Vayitzer, there's only a chiruk under the first yud. The second yud has no vowel. Why? Because it's silent to the first yud, which is the Yetzer Tov. The second one is hidden. Remez is a hint. Shechafetz Hashem. God wanted Sheyetzer Hara Nichlo B'Yetzer Tov. The idea is that the Yetzer Hara, a person has to work to be subdued to the Yetzer Tov, to the good. How do you subdue your Yetzer Hara to your Yetzer Tov? Is by watching your machshava, dibur, meiser, your thought, speech, and action. Like it says in the Tanya, what does it mean? These are the formers. They form. They check. How is your thought, speech, and action doing? He says also is someone who forms the pottery. Like it says meraglim cheresh. So it says, he quotes what the Me'er Einayim, he quotes from the Holy Baal Shem Tov. It says pachim ktanim. It says that the small vessels, the small pottery, Shechazar Aleim Yaakov, the Yaakov went back. He went back, like we know, we've learned it many times in the Sikha. The Rebbe would quote this idea that in those small potteries, the Yaakov went back. He could have left them there and went straight to Mashiach. When he went back to get the small pachim, with the small sparks, the Yaakov would not give up on. The sparks that got lost and trapped from the world of chaos. That idea of a mitzvah is to take these sparks that fell down and bring them back to their roots. We make the vessels. We bring them back to their source, to the vessels before they were broken. And he continues the idea of cheres and kli cheres. Also, cheres is al tachresh reyacha machshava. You should be a person who dominates their thoughts, speech, and action. I just want to finish the last paragraph over here. Gam cheresh inyan shtika. Cheresh also means, it says he sent spies. Cheresh means to be quiet. Like Rashi said, derech mashkasa b'rabis vayeshev, the malmim alumim, the silent mishtikuse diima. That yesh pa v'shaisek, there's a time a person should speak, and there's a time when a person should be silent. And so cheresh means sometimes also in our voida, it's sometimes there's the silent way where we're kind of quiet. It's not about projecting in our avoda. Sometimes the avoda has to be done in a silent way. But the bottom line is that from this Maamar is the point of the spies of Yehoshua, which is mandatory, or because the spies of Yehoshua is the avoda of every person, the avoda of the Beinoni, like it says in Tanya, the avoda of machshav v'dibur ma'aser, thought, speech, and action. That's something everyone can and should and has to understand within themselves and be in control of that, so we could be further and gather the amount of garments that we need. The tachlis, the bottom line, not always are we in charge of our character, that's something we work on in a pace, in a slower pace, at the right time in the right situation. All right, everyone, Laila Tov. It should be a peaceful, quiet day here in Eretz Yisrael. We already had alarms here in Yerushalayim right before the class. I wasn't sure we'd be able to give the class, but Baruch Hashem, it was quiet. Take care.